travels this week takes us to the very scenic and historical town of Graaff-Reinet in the Karoo. We'll be staying at the Karoo Park Guesthouse, we'll be visiting Nieu-Bethesda amongst other things, and we'll be going on a paleontology tour. So guys, stay tuned, let's go and see what this beautiful historical town is all about.
We have to go back to 1895, where James Henry Howard came from England. He was one of the settler families, and they bought a farm in Aberdeen and called it Skitfontein. And then when his wife and children had to come to school, you had to send them to a school where the wife had to go and look after them while he carried on farming. And Graaff-Reinet was the only town that could accommodate his wishes. So he built this farmhouse, a replica of Skitfontein's farm. So this enormous old property was actually just a replica of his farmhouse in Aberdeen. He survived until 1937. After that it changed hands quite a bit, and then it became one of Union High hostels. And this whole thing was changed into a hostel. And then it changed hands again when Union High built their own hostels onto the school property. And that's when Mr. Notling, him and his wife, bought this as their home. There was a tennis court here, there was other properties onto it which he also bought, and they started a guest house. We came to Graaff-Reinet in 1996, and we were supposed to buy Camdeboo cottages. But when we arrived here, the owner of Camdeboo cottages had other ideas for his daughter again. But we had already made up our minds that we're going to stay in Graaff-Reinet. Louise and I both being born on farms in this Karoo, Greater Karoo. So in 1996 we moved here, and we rented a huge old building which used to be a hotel in the 1700s. It only had 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, but big, enormous lounge, dining room. And we started a 5-room guest house, if you can call that, bed and breakfast. And we also served meals there, traditional meals. And then, luckily a year later, Mr. Graaff, the owner of Camdeboo Cottages, he came back to me and said, no, his daughter's not going to stay. We can buy it. So we bought that, which it's an adjoining property, so we just opened the gate, and there the 2 properties were together. A year later we bought Karoo Park Guesthouse, and we let the lease go to somebody else because we wanted to sort of upgrade Camdeboo and Karoo Park to the same levels. And that's how we actually came to Graaff-Reinet, not wanting to buy this only, but within, I would say, a year, Camdeboo Cottages could not sleep the number of people that we were getting from overseas. And the first 2 months, we actually leased rooms here from Mr. Notling. And after about 6 months, I said, no, might as well buy it, because we're giving him all the income and we're doing the hard work. And that's how we actually bought this place. It was a long, tedious buy, because he wasn't a very easy seller. So we had to really go around and around and come back and discuss this. And it was a long process. But in the end, absolutely a worthwhile process. The history, the love that we have here, and the lifestyle that we have, it's just absolutely fantastic. We don't really have to go overseas. They come to us every year. And with different stories, it's wonderful to meet them. We make great friends with our overseas clients. We've made it into a guest house, which we serve lunches on demand, but we have a full a la carte in the evenings. We also have, it's a bed and breakfast, dinner, bed and breakfast at this stage, but we also do excursions. From here, it's game drives, it's Valley of Desolation, game walks, 4x4 tracks, township tours, town tours, and then of course we have a tradition here that if you stay here and you have a meal with us, you have to have a little tot of withond. Now this is a local brew. It's done at the museum, and the beauty of it, you don't forget Graaff-Reinet once you've had it. It's made from grapes, originally from the grapes of the biggest grapevine in the world with the thickest stem. Now this stem was 3.1 meters in diameter. It unfortunately developed a fungi, and portions had to be cut away. And today it's 8 little stems, but it's still bearing some fruit. Not enough for our consumption, but the legality of it was there was a permit issued for the museum to produce out of the old kettle that you can see at Parsonage Street at the museum, and the letter actually limits the amount that they're allowed to brew, and that was 1,000 bottles per annum, per year. But luckily, they didn't mention how big the bottles could be. So that gives us a bit of leeway. In the modern times, we need more than 1,000 bottles, and we still remain legal. But that's done once a year, and they call it the Withond Festival. It's also taken a little bit of a second step, I would say, because we've now got a wine, a stoop tasting, which has taken off tremendously in this part. So again, alcohol seems to be good in Graaff-Reinet. But in any case, this farmhouse or replica of the farmhouse, you know, with the dating of it, I would say the workmanship differs so much. Some portions of the property date back as far as 1818. Now you can imagine there are no real foundations. They were built with raw bricks. So one place you hit a nail into the wall and you couldn't get it in, you just see sparks flying because there's dolerite in it. And the other one, it basically goes through the wall. So it's really, you have to know your oats with it. You can't just plaster it. You have to put chicken mesh against the wall and nail that, and then you do your plastering over it. There's things like that the old masons that were in this area, they learned their skills and they knew how to do it, and the knowledge is just passed on. The thickness of the walls, as you can also see some parts, it's very thick. We've got high ceilings, and on top of that ceiling you will find a layer of, first of all, a layer of red clay, and then you will have reeds. Now that is the insulation. In summer, when we get temperatures up to 40, 45, 48, you walk in here when it's been closed up and it feels as if aircon has been put on. And in winter, when it's also very close to freezing, you walk in here and it's nice and warm. It really does temper the temperatures dramatically.
So guys, we are outside the artistic town of Nieu-Bethesda. Now you might remember Nieu-Bethesda and the Owl House. So we are about to embark on this paleontology tour in search of our origins with Professor Bruce Rubridge from the Wits University. Now you will see behind me here is this gorgeous valley and a landscape that Professor Rubridge tells me is about 182 million years old. So guys, come with us, let's go on this tour and let's go in search of our origins.
Nieu-Bethesda.
Right guys, so I've got Professor Bruce Rubridge here with me, and he is from the Evolutionary Studies Institute from the University of the Witwatersrand, and we are outside the Kitching Fossil Center. Professor Rubridge, thank you so much for spending time with us and for taking us on this tour, and welcome to Go Well with Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. It's lovely to be able to introduce this to you and to your audience, because the Karoo has got lots of fossils in it and is one of the noted fossil places in the world, and it has the ancestors of mammals, the ancestors of dinosaurs, the ancestors of tortoises. And here in the Kitching Fossil Exploration Centre, we've tried to display some of the fossils that have been found in this area. You know, my family has a long history in this area, in this district here, because they've started farming here in 1838.
Wow.
And in 1934, my grandfather became interested in fossils, and he collected a large and important, scientifically important collection of fossils. And I've always I grew into this, I grew up with it, and I've had a passion for fossils right from the time I was born, really.
Fantastic.
And then here in Nieu-Bethesda, because the Owl House attracts something like 15,000 visitors a year,
Wow.
I thought this would be a good place to showcase fossils to the public of South Africa and indeed the world.
Yes.
Because in the riverbed over here, there are lots of fossils preserved in the rocks.
Wow.
And so what we did was we established a trail in the riverbed where people can see what fossils look like in the field, and then we have this building behind us is an orientation center where people can see the significance of the fossils that occur in the riverbed there. And so we trained up people from the local community. We have 3 guides who are employed from the local community, and they give guides around, guided tours around the riverbed and also to the fossils over here. So this is really the only place in South Africa where people can see fossils preserved in the veld, where they occur in the rocks, and then get an interpretation of them.
Oh, fantastic.
And so we can go and have a look at the exhibits inside now.
Awesome. We are going to go and have a look as soon as you tell me the significance of the Kitching Fossil Center. So why Kitching?
Yes. Now, you know, James Kitching grew up in Nieu-Bethesda. He was one of the more famous paleontologists from South Africa. He worked at Wits University for 50 years,
Wow.
but he collected fossils in the Karoo, and his real passion was to go out and collect fossils. And in fact, if you had to count together the number of nights in his diary that he worked in the Karoo, you'll find that he lived in the Karoo in a tent for 23 years of nights, if I can
Wow.
call it that. He's collected more fossils than any other single person in the world. And because he grew up in this town, I wanted to call the centre after him, because he became a world-famous paleontologist. But it's more than that. You know, James Kitching, because of his flair for finding fossils, when the Americans were trying to prove this idea of continental drift, and they were using fossils to try and point that out, they needed to show that Antarctica was connected to South Africa,
Yes.
and that if you could find the same fossils that occur in South Africa and Antarctica, you've got a reason to say that maybe these continents were once connected. And the Americans had been unable to find fossils in Antarctica, so they asked James Kitching to go across to Antarctica with them, and he found the same fossils that we found in South Africa in Antarctica, and so on paleontological evidence was the first person to prove that Antarctica and South Africa were once connected.
Oh, fantastic. That is absolutely fascinating. Right, so shall we go inside?
Okay, I'd love to show you inside.
So Bruce, we're standing here with some models, and these do not look like animals that we get on Mother Earth right now.
Yeah.
What is the story here?
Yeah, they do look a little bit different, don't they?
They're very different.
So this is a flesh-eating animal. It's called a gorgonopsian, and it had very large teeth because it was a flesh-eating animal. And now you could see that these are all just pointed teeth.
Yeah.
They don't. Animals at this stage hadn't yet evolved the molar teeth that we find in mammals today for grinding down food. So these things would have literally ripped out flesh out of their prey and then gulped huge hunks of meat. And that's the way they lived. So this is the flesh-eating type called a gorgonopsian. That one over there is a plant-eating type. Now this is a dicynodont. They were much more common. It's much like the ecosystems today, that if you go into the Karoo Park, you'll find a whole lot of antelope, a lot of impalas, kudus and those sorts of things. And so there were large ones and small herbivores, and then there were carnivores like this one over here as well. So the modern ecosystems are very similar to ecosystems of the past, but as you rightly observed, they're different players, different animals that lived. So we're talking here at a period of about 253 million years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But these animals are our distant ancestors. These they're called mammal-like reptiles or therapsids, and that is because they are primitive reptile-like animals, but they're showing mammalian characteristics and are on their way towards becoming mammals.
Absolutely fascinating.
Okay.
Great. So we're going to go inside.
We'll go
now.
inside.
Fantastic.
We're talking now about the rocks of what is geologically known as the Karoo supergroup, which covers a large part of South Africa and covers, in fact, 2/3 of the total surface area of South Africa. And it stretches from really Johannesburg in the north down to Laingsburg down here, Sutherland across there, and then Port Elizabeth and East London here. And the oldest rocks in the Karoo, these brown ones here, are called the rocks of the Dwight group. They were deposited in an ice age 300 million years ago. And then Southern Africa at that stage was situated over the South Pole, and it gradually migrated northwards, and the climate became warmer as it migrated away from the South Pole. And this was then an internal inland sea which gradually filled up with sediment, and it became progressively more arid. And at the end of the Karoo times, South Africa was actually a desert. And those rocks that you see in the Golden Gate area, where you see those prominent cliffs, sandstone cliffs, that is where some of the oldest dinosaurs in the world are found, and also the earliest mammals. And so what we preserve in the Karoo is a period from 300 million years ago with the oldest rocks to 180 million years ago with the youngest rocks. So these rocks cover a time of more than 100 million years, and we have a continuous record of the changes of life on Earth over that long time period. And what is important is 300 million years ago, reptiles first appeared on Earth. Up until then, the only animals with backbones were fish and amphibians. And then reptiles appeared 300 million years ago and diversified into the modern directions of reptiles that we know today, which is tortoises, lizards and snakes and crocodiles and birds. And then the third direction is mammals. And that all happened just after 300 million years ago, and is the best record of that whole diversification is here in the Karoo in South Africa. So where you're standing at Nieu-Bethesda now, you can see the ancestors of tortoises in the rocks. You can see the ancestors of dinosaurs, the most primitive ancestors of dinosaurs in the world, and you can see the ancestors of mammals, which includes ourselves as well. And then what happened is 182 million years ago, when these lavas were pushed up from the center of the earth and formed the prominent peaks that we see in the Drakensberg today. They were pushed up from the center of the earth, and that happened at the time that Gondwana started breaking apart, and that was the end of sedimentation in the Karoo in South Africa. So what I actually want to talk about now, and why the Karoo is important, we looked earlier that the rocks in the Karoo cover a very long time period, from 300 million years ago to 180 million years ago. And so we can see over that 100 million year period these rocks took to be deposited, we can look at the changes in the development of life on Earth over that long time period. And you can see which species appeared and which species went extinct and that sort of thing. And we find that at 252 million years ago, there is a massive cutoff. Lots of species went extinct. In fact, 90% of species went extinct, and then new forms came in. Now that is one of the things that paleontology can do, is the only discipline that can look into the past and see what has happened in the past. We've looked at various fossils that occur in the Karoo, but the knowledge that we've got from those fossils comes from the rocks where we find them originally. And that's the important part, is to go out and find them. And that's the exciting part for tourists. They want to see where these things occur. And that's why this locality here is so important, because there are lots of fossils here. And our guide, Melanie Boas, is now going to show you some of these fossils that occur in the Karoo. Melanie works at the Kitching Fossil Centre, and she then takes guided tours through the centre and also into the riverbed.
Hi Melanie, so you're going to show us a few fossils here in the dry riverbed, and can you just tell me what have we got here and how do you actually spot these things?
Firstly, to spot it, you must have a trained eye.
Okay.
You must have a trained eye and also a good imagination to identify the shape of it.
Okay.
So if you don't have a shape, you will just see it as a fossil there with no shape in it. So you must can identify the shape and also a trained eye. But what we are looking now at is an upside down skull that belongs to herbivore species Odinodon. How we know this is Odinodon? They had beaks like tortoises. The other species, Cephalopods, Dicynodons, they had a beak with a tusk. So these ones only had a beak in front which they used to grind.
Yes.
So the skull is lying upside down. There, can you see it? Normally we put that model next to it, then it can give you a clear picture at what you are looking at. So you've got you see the palate?
Absolutely.
The one side of the skull there.
Yes.
And there's the back of the skull there.
So, that is amazing.
Yeah, and as you can see, I spray water on the fossil.
Yes.
Then you can see the difference in colors between the rock and the fossil. So you can see the whiteness there, the bone
yes.
and the stone. The stone becomes dark when you make it wet. The fossil stays the same color. And if you want to touch it, you can also feel there's a difference between the rock and the fossil. So the bone or the fossil is slippery.
Yes.
The rock around it is
Oh
rough.
my word.
Now also to excavate these, you need patience.
I can imagine.
So mostly I tell, if you want to be a paleontologist, you must have patience. The biggest part, you must have patience. To find the fossil, you must have patience. To excavate them, you must have patience. And the preparation room where you clean the fossil, you must have patience.
Yes,
So it's all about patience. So if, for instance, they want to excavate this one, they will remove a big piece around it because they are not sure if it is only a skull. There could be other parts somewhere underneath still buried. So if, for instance, they want to excavate this one, they will remove a big piece around it because they are not sure if it is only a skull. There could be other parts somewhere underneath still buried.
Yes.
Maybe the body could be compressed together, yeah. So to keep all the pieces together, they have to remove a big piece around it. And therefore they will say jackhammer, and then they will lift it, take the most stone around it with hammers and chisels, and then cover it in plaster of Paris and take it to the university.
Wow.
And then they firstly will do a CT scan to see how many bones there is inside that piece they have excavated, and then they will decide to remove it with a dentist drill, which is the slowest process to clean the fossil, to remove the rock. Dentist drill.
Oh my
Man.
gosh.
And with that dentist drill, it will take you years for demonstration.
Wow.
But if you have patience, set 8 hours every day with that drill, you can do it in months. But it's all about patience.
That is absolutely fascinating.
You see the piece there? That is a scapula. Now that piece there, we are not sure does it still form part of this Odinodon or do it belongs to another creature. So that's mostly how you will find the fossils, just pieces of them.
Okay.
It could be that they could be maybe attacked by a carnivore and been pieces ripped off and leave the bones or throw the bones on other places that they got stuck there.
Oh my God. Yeah. So this animal didn't necessarily die here from natural causes?
No. As I
eaten.
earlier mentioned is that today's the riverbed.
Yes.
250 or 80 million years it was the banks of the river.
Okay.
So we can't tell for sure this is where the animals died. They could have died somewhere else and get washed down. And that's why the skulls is upside down. They got stuck on their backs.
Yes.
And also these animals were called mammal-like reptiles. If you take the reptiles of today, especially the lizards, when they die, they always die on the back.
Yes.
So that's the reason for the upside down skull. And you will see there's mostly skulls that is still been left here because that is the hardest part of the body.
Okay.
So that's why there's mostly skulls still buried here.
Okay.
So yeah, we are leaving this here for visitors to see it because most of them want to see them in the natural site where they've done the excavation, where they found the fossils. And also to excavate fossils nowadays they need permits. And to get their permit from SARO, South African Heritage Resource Agency, it's a long process to get the fossils, the permit, and also to do the excavation, you need funds therefore. And there's not funds available from government for excavation. So most of the funds there comes from the university itself, where's the permits to excavate fossils here. So that's the reason why we are leaving. And also, if they found too many of one species, they've already done enough excavations in that species, they will leave the others.
Okay. And of course, it's a nice draw card for people to come and visit this
the area,
and actually view these skulls.
Yeah, most of the visitors comes here when they see the fossils in this place. They don't think it's real. So to bring them out to the riverbed, then you show them the real picture.
Absolutely.
And then you've got them, we see now the real picture. So, and it also gives them a different eye. If they find maybe a piece of rock, not only think it is a piece of rock, there can be something more inside the rock.
Absolutely.
A fossil.
Well, you know what, to be honest with you, if you were not here and you didn't point that out to me, I would not have known that is actually a skull
Yes.
of a very, very, very ancient animal.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Okay, I'm going to take you to the next one. I've showed you the herbivore. I'm going to show you a carnivore.
Oh, yay. So, Melanie, is this our carnivore?
This is our carnivore, yeah. That was species were named the Theracophyllon. You will see it had more skull shaped like a crocodile.
Yes.
And the
yes.
crocodiles of today is also carnivores, but this were named the Theracophyllon species. Okay, you can see there's the snout
Yes.
with the two nostrils. There's one eye socket there, the other one is still bedded underneath there. So, and there's a piece of
Fascinating.
bone there sticking out. They tell
Oh,
us there
wow.
can be more
Yes.
underneath that belongs to the same species. Okay, this is actually a recent discovery.
Okay.
We had a flood in 2011, that 5 months flood.
Yes.
And 2 years after that flood, we discovered this one, the
Wow.
Theracophyllon species. So far, the one and only carnivore we discovered in this riverbed. And they've already excavated
Okay.
so the same species. And the biggest one they excavated was about 2.5 meters.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was quite a big one.
Quite a big one. We are not sure tail included only the body, but it was
Yes.
2.5 meters.
Wow.
And today we've got a lot of herbivores with different species, living in groups,
Yes.
and a few carnivores. So the proof here, I actually want to prove to you. You will today that 250 million years it was also there were also a lot of herbivores with different species living in
Yes.
groups, with a few carnivores.
Yes.
So this is the only carnivore, Theracophyllon species.
Okay. So these dudes ate the other dudes.
Yeah, yeah. And
is
they
amazing.
decided not to excavate this one also because this is the only carnivore to show to the visitors. The rest
Okay.
of them is herbivores, belongs to herbivores.
Okay. Okay. And obviously you want to be able to show both.
yeah.
Fantastic. It's absolutely amazing. It's just amazing how it pops out the minute you put the model down
The
next
water,
to it.
yeah, the model next to it, and also when you spray the water on, you can
Yes,
see the
yes.
difference in colors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is stunning. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
It is probably the time with the best pizza.
Okay.
Definitely. You could go and find your fossil. Definitely. So paleontology, the origins of mankind. People come to explore Nieu-Bethesda. But more so, they come to see where Miss Helen stayed. And Miss Helen is the artist that started what we call the Camel Yard. And today there's a museum that we call the Owl House. And Nieu-Bethesda is such a quaint town because everything can be done on foot. So you can walk around, you can experience the life like it was in the 1970s.
Fantastic.
The only problem is, in those days, I think if you're a little bit different to what the norm was, you are sort of like an outsider. And I think Miss Helen was never quite embraced for her artistic talent. If she lived today, she would have been revered. And the 1970s, she was a little bit of an outsider. And the Owl House tells that story. So, it's the cornerstone, I think, of Nieu-Bethesda tourism. But there's a lot more to see and do here. You can meet the artists. You can go to beautiful restaurants, taste like exquisite lamb. There's everything that you can possibly think
Fantastic.
of. Mountain biking, hiking, exploring Compassberg. I can sell it for a mile along. But I
Awesome.
think what we're going to go and do next is we're taking a drive out towards an area we call Ongeluksloot.
Fantastic.
So let's go and check it out.
Awesome. Shall we head?
We are now entering Ongeluksloot. And this area is famous because artist Graaff-Reinet has installed a permanent outdoor installation of stone figures that were inspired by similar figures placed in Namibia. Welcome to Stonefolk, typical Nieu-Bethesda style. Artist exhibition in the middle of the most amazing small valley called Ongeluksloot. You can get off your vehicle, stroll in and meet characters. Scattered throughout this little valley there are 10, and I think the artist is aiming to ensure that people realize that art is actually these beautiful statues, but also the phenomenally beautiful vistas that we have in the Karoo. So whilst you're here and you're scaling a mountain to find a little man either doing a handstand, a cartwheel, or whatever other, just pondering on life in general or the origins of mankind, that's what we're in search of, you also get the opportunity of enjoying the Karoo landscape. We are now heading towards St. Olives. It's the base for SA Herding Academy in South Africa. This is a holistic learning center where the ancient skill of herding animals are being taught. And it's in a beautiful old farmhouse, typical Karoo style. And we just love coming here.
If he thinks it's important,
Yeah?
then they have to excavate it and give it to a museum. That's the rule for the country. Those are little nodules in the rock, but the reason why they stand out is because they've been baked by that dolerite, that volcanic rock that came through 180 million years ago. The rocks on either side, and that's what you've got here. These are all become rock baked. It's the side of the dolerite dike. Now these dikes come up as vertical things. Now you don't look very impressed.
No, I'm
But
fascinated.
This type of fish, we can, from the type of scale it's got, we can identify it to the genus Athestonia. And so we now know that this layer has got fish scales in it. Now that's important, but we need to just bear it in the back of our mind, because I'm going to show you more and more things, and then you're going to tell me what environment these rocks were deposited in. And then I'll show you other things, and then I'll say to you what environment those rocks are deposited in. So I want you now to think about, use this evidence, and start thinking how a paleontologist would put it together. You see, here's more fish scales here, all this white stuff, these fish scales. Maybe too much wine.
It's only.
Try this.
Okay.
Right. Put that against.
Oh. Oh, wait. Okay. Just had it too far away.
Yes. So it's not focusing, it's you that's not focusing. Wow. All full of it.
Friendly, delightful little things.
Yeah, it's quite cute.
So we've got fish scales and we've got
So this is a very special site in the Karoo because it's got lots of fossils. As you've seen, we've walked down this riverbed and we've seen probably about 7 skulls already in the short distance of about 100 meters. But where we're standing now, there are a whole lot of fossilized burrows. Now, if you want to find a fossilized burrow in the fossil record, or if you want to preserve a burrow in the fossil record, a burrow is a hole in the ground in which an animal lives. Now, if you want to preserve it, you've got to fill it. And so if nature fills it by pushing in sand or mud or something like that, it's got a chance of preserving the burrow. And you've got a chance of preserving, if it's filled quickly, of the animals that lived in the bottom of the burrow. Now, if you look down here, here is a fossilized burrow. This wormy structure that goes down like that, there's mudstone on either side, because that was where the hole was in, and then a flood came over and it was filled with sand, and that is the burrow preserved. There's one under your leg also down there. If you look on the right hand side, there's a burrow going down, inclined into the rock over there. So there are a whole lot of burrows here, and I'm going to walk across here now, because there are about 3 or 4 more burrows there, and there's one with a skull preserved in it at the bottom in the terminal chamber.
That's amazing. Oh, that is absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Are we going to go look at
We're going to go and look at the other one now.
Fantastic.
Good.
Now, I just have a question. When you say excavate, would you take this whole piece of fossilized burrow and take it back to your institute and then scan it?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because you must remember we're looking at evidence of life that went on 256 million years ago. And so I've got no right to go and damage it just by quick frivolous excavation. So if we excavate this, we'll do quite a wide thing around here, so we make double sure that we don't damage this in any way. We then dig around it and we cover it with plaster of Paris and then take it back to the laboratory, where you have a team of technicians who gradually remove it out of the rock.
Amazing.
Or otherwise we CAT scan it at that point.
Okay. Oh, this is absolutely fascinating.
Cheers to Graaff-Reinet, to meeting you.
Cheers to Graaff-Reinet.
Yeah. And then for good things, definitely new friendships and great things to come of this, right?
Cheers.
Okay, ching ching.
Stanley.
Cue the dessert. I'm like, cue the soup.
I was about to say, what happened to starters made?